The throne room shook with the force of a tectonic shift. A dragon constructed of swirling sparks and thick, suffocating smoke snapped its jaws inches from the dais. King Silas scrambled backward. Boot slid, he fell, diving under the throne. Above him, the beast roared, a sound like grinding stone and rushing wind. Sparks showered the room, searing the air. How had a simple sketch on parchment unleashed this living nightmare? The king gripped the cold stone floor, his breath hitching as the creature circled, its body pulsing with an unnatural, fiery heat. He had demanded riches, yet he now faced only ruin. The dragon lowered its head, smoke curling from its nostrils, and fixed its gaze on the throne. Embers crackled. Guards fled. King faced his monster. Outside these walls, the world moved on. Unaware that the kingdom stood on the brink of total annihilation because of a single, reckless act of greed. The mystery of the boy and his brush remained the only key to survival. Buried deep in a past the king had long ignored. The smoke clears and the memory of the dragon fades into the crisp, biting air of the high mountains. Far from the stone castle, a village clings to the jagged slopes, shrouded in thick gray mist. Here, silence is the only constant. Leo kneels on the damp earth at the edge of a narrow path. He reaches out, his fingers searching the ground until he finds a smooth, sturdy stick. He presses the wood into the soft mud, dragging it with steady, practiced pressure. A curve appears, a wing takes shape. He sketches a hawk, clearing weeds for his canvas. He draws a tree, then adds detail to the leaves, his movements precise and rhythmic. Around him, the village remains still. There is no paper here, no ink, and no wealth to purchase such luxuries. He does not look for them. His eyes remain fixed on the mud, following the lines his mind has already mapped out. He works for hours, erasing and refining, turning the barren earth into a sprawling gallery of his own design. The wind whistles through the pines, but Leo does not look up. He is lost in the quiet labor of his craft, unaware that his simple sketches are about to change everything. The sky bruised purple, and the mountain air turned sharp enough to sting. A man stumbled toward the cottage, his frame bowed by exhaustion. He hit the threshold and sank into the dirt, shivering violently. While others in the village shuttered their windows against the biting wind, Leo watched from the doorway. He looked at the single bowl of soup on his table, the final meal left in his home. He did not hesitate. He scooped up the bowl, heat radiating against his palm, and knelt beside the stranger. He offered the broth, then pulled the thin wool covering from his own bed to wrap around the man's frozen shoulders. The traveler stirred, his breath hitching as warmth returned to his limbs. He looked at Leo, his eyes reflecting a sudden, brilliant light that seemed to defy the encroaching dark. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a brush. The handle glowed with a soft, steady pulse of gold. "This is for your heart," the man whispered, pressing the tool into Leo's hand. "Use it to help those in need, but remember, its magic only serves the selfless." Before Leo could ask a question, the man stood, vanished into the swirling mist, and left the boy holding the weight of a secret that hummed with a life of its own. Leo walked the perimeter of the village the next morning, the golden brush heavy and warm in his pocket. Near the wooden fence, he found a small bird trapped in the tall grass. Its wing was bent, feathers matted with dust, and it could not clear the ground. Leo knelt, his heart tightening at the sight. He found a flat, damp patch of earth nearby. He dipped the brush into a shallow puddle, the water catching the golden light of the bristles. He began to draw. He traced the curve of a wing, then the sharp arc of a beak, pressing the brush into the mud with precision. He added detail to the chest and eyes, ignoring the cold dampness seeping into his knees. As he lifted the brush for the final stroke, the drawing pulsed. The mud lines shivered. The blue paint he had conjured began to rise, pulling itself free from the dirt. The flat image rounded out, gaining volume and texture. With a sudden, sharp flutter, the bird shook off the remaining soil and launched itself upward. It circled once, chirping a vibrant, clear note that cut through the mountain mist. Before climbing higher into the sky, Leo stood, his hands shaking, watching the living color disappear into the clouds. the magic was real. Leo turned his gift toward the struggle of his neighbors. He walked to the parched fields at the valley edge, where the crops had withered into brown dust. He knelt, cleared a path in the hard earth, and began to paint. He drew a wide, winding channel. As the brush traced the route, the sound of rushing water filled the air, and clear liquid surged into the bed, soaking the thirsty soil. He moved on to the village square, where empty stomachs were the norm. He dragged his brush across the flat stone, drawing baskets piled high with warm bread. The smell of fresh yeast filled the morning air as the baskets solidified, ready for the hungry to claim. Nearby, a farmer stared at a cart with a shattered axle. Leo did not say a word. He painted sturdy, iron-bound wheels directly onto the frame. The wood groaned as the new parts merged with the old, turning the useless pile of scrap into a functional carriage once more. He worked until the sun dipped low, his face smeared with dust, his hands aching with effort. He took no payment and asked for no recognition. He simply watched from the shadows as the villagers gathered water, ate their fill, and hauled their goods to market. Their laughter became the only reward he required. The news of the boy who could paint life into existence crossed the mountains, carried on the wind until it reached the dark stone walls of the capital. King Silas sat upon his throne, eyes narrowing as his advisors spoke of gold, grain, and miracles. He did not care for the hungry or the thirsty. He wanted the power for himself. By midday, ironclad guards descended upon the village. They did not ask for Leo. They snatched him from the square, ignoring the cries of his neighbors. They tore the golden brush from his grip, the bristles snagging on his sleeve, and threw him into the back of a black carriage. The mist of the mountains gave way to the sharp, cold stone of the castle gates. Leo was dragged through corridors that smelled of damp moss and old iron. He was shoved into the throne room, the heavy doors slamming shut behind him, sealing out the light. King Silas stood, his gaze fixed hungrily on the brush held by his captain. He gestured toward the barren floor. "Paint me a mountain of gold," the king commanded, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Do it now, or you will rot in the dungeon until your bones turn to dust." Leo looked up, his feet planted firmly on the cold marble, and refused to break his stare. Leo held his ground, his voice steady as he looked at the stone walls. "The magic will not work for greed," he said. The king scoffed, lunging forward to snatch the golden brush from his captain. He gripped it with white-knuckled intensity, his eyes fixed on the empty floor. "I will do it myself," he spat. He strode to the wall, dipped the bristles into a jar of thick yellow pigment, and began to smear it across the stone. He moved with frantic, jerky motions, painting a massive, jagged pile of coins. But the paint did not behave. It hit the surface and instantly darkened, shifting from a bright yellow to an angry, pulsing red. The air in the room grew heavy and hot. The king laughed, oblivious to the change, and added more strokes. The paint began to bubble and hiss. Rising off the wall as if caught in a sudden gale, it twisted, stretching into a thick, muscular shape that defied the flat surface of the stone. The wall groaned under the pressure of the shifting mass. The king stepped back, the brush still clutched in his hand, as the pile of gold morphed into a singular, colossal head. It opened its eyes, and the throne room began to tremble. The wall shattered outward as the dragon tore itself free, a mass of swirling sparks and blinding smoke that surged into the center of the hall. It snapped its jaws, teeth of hardened pigment, biting through the air with a sound like grinding stone. King Silas scrambled backward, his feet tangling as he rushed to find cover. He tripped, his heavy weight hitting the marble floor hard. The creature whipped its tail, smashing the dais and sending stone fragments flying across the room. The king dived, sliding beneath the golden throne, gasping for breath as the floor vibrated with every heavy footfall of the beast. Sparks rained down from the ceiling, scorching the tapestries and filling the room with a thick, suffocating haze. The dragon lunged toward the throne, its massive head looming over the wreckage, eyes glowing like dying embers. The king pressed himself into the corner of the floor, paralyzed by the sheer terror of his own creation. He had wanted gold, but he had unleashed a nightmare. The room echoed with the beast's roar, a sound that shook the very foundation of the castle. turning the royal sanctuary into a collapsing trap of smoke and fire. Leo ignored the chaos, his eyes fixed on the golden brush lying abandoned near the base of the shattered dais. He moved with purpose, dodging falling debris and the dragon's lashing tail. He reached the brush, snatched it from the floor, and turned toward a nearby vase of water. The beast roared, its heat searing the air. But Leo did not flinch. He dipped the bristles deep into the cool water, washing away the residue of the king's frantic, greedy strokes. The brush glowed with a soft, steady light. Leo stepped into the center of the hall, raised his hand, and began to paint. He moved with fluid, practiced precision, drawing a thick line in the air that materialized into heavy, cold iron. The bars solidified, locking into place around the dragon's thrashing body. The creature hammered against the iron, but the structure held, binding the smoke and sparks into a confined space. With a final, decisive stroke, Leo completed the seal. The dragon shrieked, its form shuddering and collapsing inward. The iron cage vanished, and in its place, a cloud of harmless, sparkling glitter settled slowly over the marble floor. The room fell silent. King Silas crawled out from beneath the throne, his posture broken and his movements sluggish. He looked at the glitter scattered across the floor, then at the brush held firmly in Leo's hand. The greed that had fueled his command had vanished, leaving only a hollow exhaustion. He stood, straightened his posture, and signaled for his guards to open the castle gates. He declared that his treasury would be emptied to feed the hungry and restore the broken homes in the valley. Leo accepted the brush back, offered a brief nod, and turned toward the mountain path. He walked through the gates and back into the cool, misty air of his village. The villagers met him with cheers, but Leo simply smiled, finding his reward in the restored peace of his home. He spent his final days there, using his gift only to mend what was broken and grow what was needed. He learned that the greatest power does not come from wealth or status, but from the simple, steady act of giving to others. True magic lives in a selfless heart. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this tale, hit the like button, share the video, and subscribe to Bedtime Magic Stories for more adventures. See you next time.